Now, the ex-champ, Buster Douglas, who lost his heavyweight championship to, I believe it was Evander Holyfield, 2 years after he lost the championship, developed diabetes, brittle diabetes. And we know that diabetes is caused, adult onset diabetes, is caused by a deficiency of two trace minerals, chromium and vanadium. And we'll talk about that in detail in just a little minute here. The rate of brain cancer in America has gone up 700% in the last 50 years. And, of course, there's all kinds of athletes who die of brain cancer. Lyle Alzado, football player. Last year, I think it was August, Fred Lebow, the founder of the New York Marathon, died of brain cancer at age 56. And then in November of 1994, not too many, about 8 months ago, I guess, Wilma Rudolph, the first woman to ever win 3 gold medals in track and field, died of brain cancer at age 54. And this has nothing to do with cellular telephones. In laboratory animals, we can create brain cancer in animals by giving them a deficiency of a trace mineral called gallium, G-A-L-L-I-U-M, gallium. You give them plenty of gallium, you supplement gallium in their feed and give them a chemical that will cause brain cancer. You can't give them brain cancer. But you give them a gallium-deficient diet and give them the same chemical, they'll all get brain cancer. Excuse me. So I believe that this increase in brain cancer in America is not due to cellular telephones. In fact, it is due to a gallium deficiency, and our athletes are giving us the early clue. Now here's the bottom line. Here's the real clue telling us what's going on with our athletes and what they are in fact giving us this early warning. This little study was very interesting. Talked about gymnasts in college and universities. As many as 62% of female college gymnasts suffer from anorexia. They get depressed, they don't eat, they're not hungry, and if you don't do something about it, they die. I used to see a lot of these little gals up in my practice because when I practiced up in Portland, Oregon, that was the time of Olga Korbut. Remember this little gal, I think from Romania? And she was the first gymnast to ever get perfect scores in all the events that they were in. And every parent in the Northwest, at least that I knew of, wanted to have their daughters be Olga Korbut. I mean, she was the darling of the world at that point. And so I saw a lot of anorexia way back in those days. And these little gals, I used to see dozens of them a month because there was an athletic or a gymnastic training center in just about every corner back then. And I did hair analysis on these little gals, and sure enough, they were all deficient, very severely deficient in a trace mineral called zinc. And they wouldn't eat, of course. Instead of fighting them and arguing with them and sending pills home to their mothers, I knew they were just going to flush down the toilet. I'd have them come in and I'd give intravenous minerals to these girls, including intravenous zinc. And in 10 to 14 days, they were back doing their gymnastics, they were eating, they were just great little gals, they weren't depressed anymore. And the mothers who took their daughters to counselors and shrinks, those little girls were counseled unto death. Many of you remember Karen Carpenter from the Carpenter singing group. Was 28, 30 years old, I believe, and she had anorexia, and she went all over the world looking for a shrink or a counselor that could help her with anorexia, and nobody gave her any minerals, and they counseled her unto death. Now, what could possibly be the common denominator between a 65-pound gymnast, a 250-pound boxing champion, 7-foot-tall basketball players, huge football players, runners of all kinds? What could possibly be the common denominator? Well, they all sweat. And when they sweat, they don't just sweat out potassium, they sweat out all 60 essential minerals. And if you sweat out all of your selenium, if you sweat out all of your selenium and don't replace it with supplementation, you're at high risk of dying of a cardiomyopathy heart disease. If you sweat out all of your copper and don't replace it by supplementation, you're at high risk of dying of a ruptured aneurysm. You sweat out all of your chromium and vanadium and don't replace it by supplementation, you're at high risk of dying of diabetes. You sweat out all of your gallium and don't replace it, you're going to get a brain cancer. You're a teenage girl and you sweat out all of your zinc, you have a 62% risk of getting anorexia and dying. Now, you don't have to just sweat when you're an athlete. What if you're a farmer bucking bales every July and August? What if you're a woman going through menopause and you're sweating all night? What if you're a baker in the ovens or a welder or a steel maker and you sweat? If you don't replace those minerals by supplementation, you're at high risk of dying from those horrible diseases.